So the first step in creating your project is to set up all of your files in the right locations. So I've gone ahead and logged into my Y drive, and inside of my Y drive I've created a folder in my communications folder for stop action and with my name on it. This folder is absolutely essential. If you don't create this folder, your project will have its files all over the place, and that's really not what you want. You're going to lose things, and it's just not going to work out the way that you want it to. So inside of this folder I have an additional folder. I simply call it images. I encourage you to do the same. You can call it whatever you want as long as you know what's in it. Inside my images folder, I added in all of the pictures from the camera of all the different stop action moments that we took, all the photos during the production. So that's all in one folder all by themselves. There's a reason for that. It makes it super easy to import them into Premiere later on. So try as much as you can to keep them inside of that one folder. The other thing I have is a logo file. You'll have your own logos. You can simply have them as Illustrator files if it's the only thing on your Illustrator page. Make sure you create a new Illustrator file with just your logo on it. Save it, import it into your project folder. Do the same with your partners' logos, because they'll of course also be located on your project. So that's all we need so you'll have multiple logos here. This will be all that we'll need in order to create our project for the moment. So when I launch Adobe Premiere, there's a couple of boxes that I'll be presented with that are very, very important. So this is the first time you open Premiere, this is what's important. So I'm going to click on New Project. Under New Project, I have a couple of boxes that are really important here. This is the New Project dialog. First thing I'm going to do is give it a name, Stop Action, and I'm going to put my name in it. You'll put your group's names in it. The next thing is this location box. This is very important because this is what's actually telling your project where you're saving all of your files. So I'm going to click on Browse. I'm going to go to my desktop, so I can go into my Y drive and go locate the folder that we had created before, so Stop Action. Now I'm going to click once on the folder and I'm going to select Choose. I'm not going to go into the folder. And you can see here in the folder list I've got Volumes, Amphileon, it's in my Communications folder for the course, and then it's got / the name of the folder that I'm using. If you go into that folder, if I go back to Y drive, you'll see there's an issue that occurs. If I go in the folder, it's way too easy for me to then go inside of Images. If I choose this folder, you'll see Images is now part of the path. You don't want that. That means your project will not see anything outside of that folder, for example, your logos. So this would be the wrong way to do it. You want to click on Browse and just select the folder. Don't go inside of it. So if we go here, just select that one folder because you're saying this folder contains everything in my project. So now when I click OK, I'm just going to get the next dialog box here, which is the one that's actually setting up this sequence. Now the sequence is the video project that holds all of your clips together. So for example, it says Sequence 1 right now. You could probably leave it like that actually. Sequence 1 is a fine name. You can rename it whatever you want, but we're just going to keep it with Sequence 1 at the moment. What you're also presented with is what video format do you want to be using. Now we're always going to go and use the same one. We're going to go Digital SLR under 720p, and we're going to pick the one that says 23.976. Okay, this will be the one that we're going to select for all of our projects. It's DVD quality, and it's formatted already to take images and videos directly out of our Canon digital SLR cameras. So this is the one we want to pick. Now we're going to click OK. So now we have it. We have our Premiere project created, but there are no files inside of it in order to actually use on our timeline, but the project is created. So I'm just going to go File Save, make sure that's saved, and from here we can start importing and adding features. One thing I'll mention just before we move on to the next step is it's very, very important that you choose File Save As at various points during your production of this to add a number to the end of your file. The reason for this is that you will, if I just go to my folders here, you'll see that every time I do that, it of course creates a new version of my document. So if I can go File Save As again, you'll see what I mean. If I put a 3 on the end, it's saving multiple versions of the same file. This project file is a file that links all of your videos together based on what you do on the timeline. If anything's going to go corrupt in your project, it's going to be this file. So I can't stress enough how important it is to make multiple copies of it so you can always go back to a prior version. It's not a question of if it's going to go corrupt. It will go corrupt for you, and you are going to need to have backups in order to make sure that you don't lose all of your work. These are the files also, if you look at their size, they're very small, a few kilobytes. less than a megabyte. These are the files that you want to email yourself. So go into your UG Cloud and add as attachment an email to yourself, to your UG Cloud, this file. And do that periodically through probably a couple times a day as you're working on your project, so that you always have a backup copy locally to your computer, but then also in your drive on Google. So an email is a really nice way of doing that, because it's also dated because you can find it. All right, enough about that. Let's import some files and go on to the next step. So now that we have our Adobe Premiere project created, we need to create or to import our files so that we can actually start dropping them into the timeline and doing a few things. So the first thing I'm going to point out is that we have a timeline here. This timeline is literally in seconds, so this is where you're going to drop in your video clips that'll play in sequence, and it's also got audio separate from video. You can scroll down the timeline in both directions, and using these little handles you can actually zoom into the timeline. You can see that now my window spans about 15 seconds, 14 and a bit seconds, versus if I stretch this out, it's now spanning a minute long in distance. So this, grabbing the handle, zooms into your timeline, and then of course dragging this is scrolling along the timeline. Now there's a couple of parts to Premiere. This is your preview window where your project will be previewing so you can see what you're doing. This is where you drop in your video files, your timeline, and this is where all of the media that you can use in your project is located. So this is the location we're going to start with because we have to import the files that we're going to use in order to create our project. So I'm going to double click in this space, which is going to open up the folder that we told Premiere that all of our files were located in. I'm going to select, let's start with logo. I'll hit import. I now have logo as an option inside of this, this space. I also have sequence 1. Don't delete that, because you'll notice it says sequence 1 here. Sequence 1 is where I'm dropping inside of all of the files. So think of it like a scene in a movie. Sequence 1 will hold a whole bunch of clips. I can add sequence 2, sequence 3, sequence 4 for different scenes in a movie. For now we'll just have one, but that's what that's all about. So this logo, when I put it on the timeline, let me zoom into this so we can see what's going on. I've actually put it inside of sequence 1. So this sequence 1 is actually holding logo, and it'll hold everything else as well. So now I have, I can go onto the edges of this and stretch it out so it occupies more time. You'll notice that right now it's occupying, looks like, a little less than 2 seconds. So I'm going to go and make it occupy, let's see, how many seconds do we want? Maybe we'll go 4 seconds. So we'll drag it out to here so that it's occupying, you'll see the timer here, about 4 seconds. Now we don't want it to just start with my logo on the screen. We want to do a fade in. So I'm going to click on this so that I have this selected. I'll drop a keyframe, because this yellow line represents opacity. If I bring this down, it's making it, you can see in the preview window, it's making it semi-transparent. If I bring it up, it becomes opaque again. So if I put my timeline a little bit into the future there, I can drop 2 keyframes and then drag one down. You'll see that it now makes a nice little fade in. So it'll stay there, and then maybe at this point I'll add in 2 more points to make a nice gradual fade out. I'll save this file, spacebar previews, so you'll see that it stays on and then it does a nice little fade out. So fade in, fade out.